afternoon, and welcome to AIADA's AutoTalk. I'm your host, Rachel Soleimani. Before we get started with today's presentation, a few quick reminders as always. Anyone who is registered for today's program will be receiving a copy by the end of this week. And if you have any questions, feel free to enter them into the Q&A section at the lower right-hand side of your screen. Now, please join me in welcoming back Doug Austin, CEO at StrategicSource. Doug, I just want to say I know Veterans Day just passed, but every day is Veterans Day, so thank you for your service. And with that, I will let you take it away.
My pleasure. Thank you, Rachel, and thanks everybody for joining today. We have a brief webinar that we'll go through here in about 25 minutes to try to get through this. We also are going to have a couple of times I will have a phone number up. So if you would like to get a PDF copy of this in the meantime, just feel free to text us that number. So the title today is Now is the Time to Recession-Proof Your Dealership. We all know we've been through the elections last week. We know that there's some challenging economic times. A little bit about StrategicSource. Better known, we've been in the spend management space a little over 27 years. We work on indirect expense categories, and we're really trying to help our clients keep more of their money. In the final analysis, it's cost reductions, it's audits, it's new revenue opportunities, but the objective is to keep more of your money. And right now in these challenging times, I think that's a recipe for everybody. We do have experience in spend planning, extraction, coding, benchmarking, sourcing, and quoting. So a lot of the information I'm going to share with you today is based on the information from our practice. We're going to talk about what a recession is, impact to the dealers, 20 winning strategies to implement, and they're not all necessarily in my wheelhouse. They're not all necessarily in spend management. But then we're going to talk about an opportunity to cut costs, a spend management assessment that you can take in your organization today. And if you do that, we'll be happy to put it into an Excel format and graph it for you. We'll talk about spend mapping and then the summary and next steps. So the current environment, what are the economic indicators of a recession? Well, there's a lot of disagreement around this right now. We know we're at a 40-year high of inflation, 8.5%. We have COVID issues. We've got large purchases are being delayed. We saw, I think this morning, that Amazon is laying off another 10,000 folks. A lot of the tech companies are doing that. Consumer debt is increasing, and certainly interest rates are rising, which are probably having some impact on affordability of cars. The signs of a recession typically are a decline in consumer spending, a decline in real income, rise in unemployment, high interest rates, falling home prices, bear market, and at least a decline in real GDP of 2 successive quarters. Well, we've had that. In the most recent quarter, we had an increase. So, but economists are a little bit unsure what that's going to look like going forward. So you can argue that we are not, but more probably, we are probably in the early phases of a recession right now. And if that's the case, we certainly want to be ready for that. Some of the top concerns from the Aberdeen Group, which is a good research source for you if you're interested in what are their top concerns for owners, CFOs, and controllers. Well, certainly need to mitigate risk, increase profitability, optimize working capital, and need to reduce operating expenses. So that's on the mind of the C-suite for dealerships. If you want a copy of this presentation, 612-386-3898. Chris Austin will get this over to you in a PDF. So some of the impact to dealerships of this recession, well, certainly large purchases can be impacted. CarMax just reported some unaffordability issues. Their used car sales are declining. The new car market may not be immune either. We know that there's pent-up demand out there, but the interest rates might be mitigating some of that. So then the question, will service business grow as car replacements lag? Are consumers, will they hold off on car repairs as they don't budget for that typically? Will repair orders increase in size? Will ancillary services continue? So those are some of the trade-offs that we need to be concerned with. But in any event, we want to prepare to win. So I did a lot of research in preparation for this webinar. You look back, prudent businesses will prepare for the unexpected. Some businesses in the 2008, 2009 recession closed for good. Of course, a number of us survived, and some new businesses will emerge if prepared. So the watchword is, let's get ready and let's prepare to win if we can. So I'm going to talk about 20 winning strategies to combat recession here, um, and kind of combat recession, prepare for recession. This is a chart, and I'm not going to read all this because I have it broken down in slides, but this is a chart that breaks it down into the investment side, finance, marketing and sales, and spend management. So we'll go through those briefly. On the investment side, one strategy would say, well, this might be the time to pursue strategic acquisitions. In automotive news yesterday, it looked like I read an article, it looked like some of the acquisition activity might be slowing down right now. Although we had Erin Kerrigan deliver a webinar for us here probably 6 weeks ago, and she said that, the pace was pretty brisk. I talked to Alan Haig at the AICPA 3 weeks ago, and it sounds like activity there is still pretty strong, but at least in the automotive news yesterday, it looks like that might be slowing down a little bit. Another strategy is to invest in IT automation. Again, trying to drive new efficiency, take advantage of data. The third strategy is to assess and improve the ROI of current projects. There's a lot of investments, projects that the dealers are looking at, from DMS to other automation. It might be time to just take a look at that and, is it still going to provide the ROI that you hope for? If not, maybe you put that on the shelf for a while. Number 4, build an incentivized, agile workforce, outsource non-core tasks. There's a lot of organizations that outsource HR, IT, marketing, even purchasing, legal, different tasks. We know that dealers are struggling to get all the headcount they need to operate the businesses, and one strategy might be to outsource as much of that and shift that burden back to somebody else. And number 5 is take a look at underperforming real estate and other assets that you can offload before, if we get into a full recession, property values are expected to decrease. We know interest rates are going up, and the real estate market is slowing. So it might be time to divest of that now. Now let's shift over to the financial side. One of the finance strategies might be to, one, set a budget, then try to increase cash on hand to 6 months of expenses. Our CFO here is on my case to kind of rein in spending so that we've got 6 months of operating expenses. We're not there yet, but we're working to that so that we've got a little bit of cushion. Another strategy is accelerate collection of open receivables and stay current. Number 3, reduce and optimize overhead and inventory levels. So, and implement KPIs on key business drivers. There's a lot of inventory in those parts departments. There are vendors out there who are willing to buy that back in some cases. Shop supply vendors that we work with that will buy used inventory. One thing I'd suggest is maybe take a walk around your shop. If you see a parts bin in the shop somewhere, rub your finger over the top of it. If you find a lot of dust, you're likely to have too much inventory. There are vendors that will buy that back and help clean up and organize your shop as a result. Number 4, secure new capital before it's needed, new lines. I just finished this myself. We've had a banking relationship for many years. We're trying to renew our line of credit and increase it where possible. Not that we need it, we're debt free, but we just want to have more breathing room in case we ever do need it. So secure that new capital now, new lines of credit if you can access that. Number 5, restructure and pay off any existing debt before interest rates rise again. A lot of folks are on variable interest rates. If you can lock in at a lower fixed rate and then refinance later, that's a smart option too. So now let's move over to the marketing and sales side. Certainly, one strategy is focus on improved margins. Number two, invest in stronger relationships with your current customers. I know that a lot of dealers will market to their current customer base not only to sell new, but to increase the penetration on repairs and parts. Number three, broaden target markets to capture new opportunities that others can't attack. You probably have a competitive advantage in some areas of your business, and it might be time to exploit that now and see if you can increase your market penetration. Number four, increase market share in your primary markets. If you're doing something well in your primary market, you might want to leverage that and attack that to increase that market share. And number five, maybe there's new revenue streams. Maybe there's some new services that you can provide that you didn't provide a year ago. Maybe you bring paintless dent repair in. Maybe you do wheel repair. Maybe you sell WeatherTech floor mats if you're not already doing that. So there are other revenue streams that you can bring in. Some other ideas are auditing suppliers on a contingency basis. So every one of you are spending money shipping FedEx and UPS. There are companies that will come in and audit those invoices, and for every time that you're overcharged, they'll take a percentage of that overcharge and then push the rest of those dollars back to you. So that'd be another example of a new revenue stream. And then if you got non-performers out there, it's a good opportunity to shut that off. The fourth area in our chart excuse me, is really the spend management operations strategies. We're sitting here today, November 15th. We've got a month and a half left. It is an ideal time to be looking at your spend strategies for 2023. Build a plan. We call it a spend map, but build a plan. You've got 160 categories out there that you will likely spend money on next year, and you can either ignore it and just let it happen by itself, or you can get proactive about it and build a plan and know that you're going to take cost out of that. Number two, this is a big problem in dealerships. They have far too many suppliers. They are sub-optimized. A typical dealer, a well-run dealership should have about 250 suppliers if it's a single point. But it is not uncommon to see 1,000 vendors for smaller groups or 1,500 vendors. I've seen a large mega group that you all know the name of that has 30,000 suppliers out there. There is no reason for that. It's highly inefficient and it drives your back office costs. So number two is optimize that supplier base, drive that sucker down, drive some new efficiencies in, and redeploy that. So the best thing to do is get proactive and go out there and lock those prices in. Number four, improve your supplier business terms. Get early payment discounts. Most dealers today are cash rich. Negotiate a 2%, 10, net 30 payment terms and pay early to get that extra discount. Pay with a credit card. Get discounts off list. There are a multitude of ways to save cash and keep more of your money. Number five, implement supplier post-compliance audits. So you can bring auditors in to look at your utilities, your uniforms, your waste, your small package transportation. If you are overpaying, if somebody has made a mistake, there's a good opportunity there to get some of that money back in your pocket where it belongs. Now, let's talk about dealer data, opportunities, and scope. How many expense categories does a dealership manage annually? And how much can a $100 million dealership save annually in supply and service expenses? So typically dealers have 130 categories that they're spending money in. They will typically spend 5% of their top line. If you're a $100 million store, you'll spend $5 million on those supply and services. A typical single point store has about 400 suppliers. You can do the math. It's about a 3-to-1 ratio of suppliers to expense categories. It's inefficient. About 5% of the dealership groups out there have a centralized purchasing department. So that means 95% do not. And that's why, and Aberdeen has proved this and we've backed it up, the dealers are spending 25% too much. And in last year's case, we did 2,200 projects. We saved dealers 27%. That's money that you could have kept in your pocket. So these are facts to remember, keep in mind as you start to look at what you're going to do in 23. Here's just a chart, 4 different revenue bands, 25, 50, 100, $300 million, what you're likely to spend for supplies and services at 5%. If you can save 25% of that, or we're trying to be conservative here at 20%, even the smallest dealer could pull in $250,000. A $50 million dealership should be able to save $500,000, and a $100 million group should be able to save $1 million and on. So the question you ask, those cost savings flow to the bottom line. What sales do you need to generate that same kind of net? Ultimately, the dealers that are doing this kind of work, attacking their expenses, are going to drive new efficiencies into the organization too. So it's worth, the expression, the lemon is worth the squeeze in this case. Here's an example of 72 expense categories that any business will have. Whether you're a church or an auto dealership or a manufacturing company, you're going to spend money here. If you're an automotive dealership, you're going to spend money in these automotive categories, which is another 56. And if you own your own facility, which most of you do, you're going to spend money in these categories. So it is easy to get to 130 to 160 categories that you have to manage to control your expense line. So what are the next steps here? Well, we want to assess the organization, tighten processes, controls, and policies, build a 2023 spend map, set aggressive objectives, and then execute, measure, and report. So how do we do that? Well, so how many people in your organization are bringing suppliers on and committing company funds? That's the question. That's why supply bases are so big. Because if there are too many people buying, too many people with purchasing authority, and too many people growing your supplier base and growing your inefficiency. Here's a spend management best practice assessment. I would encourage you to take this and answer it if you want. Once you get a copy of our deck, fill it out, email it to me, and then we will turn it into a chart that looks like this. And this will tell you anything in red is a concern, anything in orange is something we probably want to tweak, and anything in green, you're good to go. But what we're looking at here is processes. Do you have purchasing processes, objectives in place? Do you have the right team in place? How is your payable? Do you have a contract tracker in place? Are you using a three-way match when you pay suppliers so that you can avoid fraud? Do you have terms and conditions? These are kind of the fundamentals. If we were teaching baseball today, this is how to stand at the plate, where to put your feet, how to hold that bat, and where to swing to make contact. We need to get these things in place. Otherwise, any cost reductions that you're able to achieve right now will likely evaporate at some point. We want to get these controls in place to tighten things up. So if you take that assessment, fill it out, shoot it over to us, we'll turn it into a nice graph like this you can share with your team and help convince them that you might need to change some of your practices. Let's talk about spend mapping and building a plan for 2023. This is ultimately what we want to end up with. We want a chart. We call this this is a spend map, but ultimately it's going to say the name of the category, how much spend you have in it annually, how many suppliers you have. And this is kind of interesting because, why do you need 67 companies that are providing you with auto parts, or 6 different vendors on auto body parts, 10 different office supply companies? This tells us a lot. If you're strategic or tactical, if you're strategic, we're going to have a real low number here. If you're tactical, the numbers are out of control. But this is ultimately what we want to end up with. We want to end up with a plan for 2023 that says, what are we going to do? When are we going to do it? And who's in charge? In order to start that, I encourage people to create their SMART objectives around spend management. Now, I went to public school, so my SMART objectives have two A's in it, but any of those objectives need to be specific, measurable, attainable, action-oriented, results-oriented, and time-phased. That's a decently written objective if it meets all of that criteria. Here's some examples of what those objectives might look like. You might want to set an objective around cost reductions, another one about volume rebates, and certainly another one around your supplier base. And so I've got examples here of what those objectives should look like. And you can be free to use them or alter them as you please, but I would encourage you to do that for 2023. So what are some of the next steps? Final questions. Is the economy in a recession? What will the impact be on your dealership? How many expense categories are you really managing today? If it's not 130, I'll bet, a dinner that you're probably between 90 and 100 that you're managing annually. How much can a $100 million dealership save annually in supply and services costs? Well, we know you're going to spend 5%. You're going to spend $5 million. We're pretty sure you can save 25% of that. So $1.25 million is a pretty safe bet a year. And does it make sense to be proactive and take steps today to mitigate some of these economic headwinds? That's really questions I think you need to answer. The fact that you're on this webinar says you're probably pretty interested in that. So in terms of summary, inflation is here. Recession may be here. We may be in the early stages, but we certainly know a downturn is here. Just look at all the layoffs that are being announced in the Wall Street and in your local papers. A recession is likely. Significant savings are available for dealerships and supplies and services, as much as 25%. So really the next steps are preparation is the key. Review the 20 strategies with your management team is what I suggest. Review the spend management strategies to assess risk and opportunities. Plan now for 2023. Set aggressive objectives. You now know what the target should be. You can, shoot for that target amount or be more aggressive than that. Execute a comprehensive plan to cut costs and then celebrate your wins. We've had good luck too, even before I got my own business going 20 years ago, having a purchasing team, and sometimes I would create incentives that we would allow the buyers or the category managers or whoever we were managing and leading in that time, generate or build a big aggressive objective and then let them share in some of the proceeds. Give them a percentage or two of the cost savings as a bonus. So that's a good strategy as well, and kind of gets people aligned around what they should be doing. So, are there any questions out there? I think I'm at 24 minutes, so I shouldn't get in trouble with Dan and Rachel. We're right about on time. I'm sorry I blazed through this so fast, but I know your time is at a premium. So a little bit about StrategicSource and how we might be able to help. We've got kind of an innovative offering right now. We have a lot of clients that are on a full end-to-end solution, our profit improvement program, where we do the analysis, we do the sourcing, implementation, we do audits, and we guarantee ROI on that. We also do audit and recovery services where we can do ongoing audits of suppliers for your operation. We can do that on a contingency. We can go just attack some categories. If you don't want to go full blown, we can look at some full categories and look at that on a contingency. And we also have an expense edge portal. It's kind of a self-service, data-driven, learning-driven solution as well. So they're all designed to help reduce costs, save time, and help you keep more of your money, which is, I'm sure, what you're interested in doing as a business owner. So if there's anything we can help you with today, sales@strategicsource.com. You can also reach out to Chris Austin at strategicsource.com. I've given you this phone number a couple of times, 612-386-3898. We'd be pleased to send a copy of this presentation over via PDF. And if anybody has any questions on this, again, if you want to complete that assessment, that best practice assessment, go ahead and do that. Send that, if you can scan it and send it to myself. We will get that converted into a graph and send it back to you, and be happy to walk you through what some of those implications are. AIADA, you guys have been a great partner. Thank you for your time today. I really appreciate the opportunity to share this information, and we stand by ready to help in any way we can. Thank you.
Again, we thank you too. This is some really great information. I love how detailed you have everything. Some little things that you guys catch, not everyone thinks to catch themselves. So thank you again. You will all be receiving a copy of this webinar by the end of this week, so you will get the YouTube recording and the PDF. To those on the line, join me back here on Tuesday, November 22nd at 2 p.m. Eastern as Moss Adams talks tax considerations for year-end planning. For more information about AIADA, visit aiada.org. Thanks for tuning in and have a great day, everyone.